This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode, I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 380 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's topic is actually, well, a surprising one to me. It just arose from some great chats I had, and it's called Pandemic Travel and Big Life Changes. Firstly, I'd like to pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation where I'm recording this podcast. So the pandemic seems to have kind of receded into the background of our lives, right? 2020 now feels like quite a long time ago, and yet all of that chaos does in some ways feel like yesterday as well. It's one of those weird things of life, isn't it? And I had not really intended to speak about the pandemic again, maybe ever, but just within a couple of days, a few weeks back, I interviewed two guests who both happened to have really good stories that were related to pandemic travel and making huge life changes. And I knew where I could get another one. And so here we have a whole episode about this. Now, I was reflecting on, why these sort of things come together, why these stories happen around times of big impact like a pandemic. And I think it is often the case that we have a feeling we want to make some big life changes, but we need a bit of a push. And sometimes we get the push internally, or perhaps something happens, you hear of something, a divorce, a bereavement, and then people go off and change their lives. But sometimes we get a global push, like a pandemic. And so perhaps that's, part of why these stories exist. But I'll leave you to think about that. On to our first guest, who is Shannon O'Brien. Now, Shannon is an international school teacher. She has taught all over the world, but it so happened that at the start of 2020, she was teaching in Shenzhen in China. And it was school break time. She went to Indonesia for a short holiday, but that holiday turned out to be, well, not so short.
So I was teaching in China at the time, and we have Chinese New Year holiday, basically. So I had traveled to Sumatra. I had been there before to an area called Bukit Lawang. I highly recommend it. It's a very beautiful place where the rainforest kind of meets a village, and there's this gorgeous river in between. Tourists go there because you can hike in the jungle and see orangutans in the wild. There in Borneo are actually the only two places in the world you can see them in the wild. But in Borneo, it's more of a rehabilitation center where these are actually wild orangutans, like not being fed by humans or taking care of them. So I had been there previously and done some trekking in the jungle and built relationships with these guides that I really trusted. When you go there, it's adventurous, but it's quite manicured treks. They have camps set up that are literally never taken down. And many tourists do that. And I wanted kind of more of a raw, real jungle experience. So I had made a plan. It was just me and 3 guides to just go deep into the Sumatran rainforest for 1 week. We trekked 150 kilometers, just ending up in a completely different area, popping out at a different village. It was amazing.
That does sound amazing, yeah.
It was very cool. So and then of course we're completely cut off from the world doing our jungle thing. And then when we got out and went to a hotel, I ran into some tourists and was chatting with them, and they said, "Oh, you live in China. I think there's some really crazy illness going on there right now." And to be honest, from my experience living there was always something. Like my school had a swine flu outbreak 3 times, and I was like, it's
Didn't
okay.
take it too
Oh no,
seriously.
I think lots of people are wearing masks and things, and I'm like, in China people do that a lot. There's pollution, whatever. And then I turn on my phone and I have hundreds of messages streaming through because during that break, because in Chinese New Year, everyone spreads out and travels to visit their families and whatnot. That was when COVID really hit in China. And the country closed its border. My school shut down and moved to remote learning. And now I was essentially homeless. So my 2-week holiday turned into 8 months of living in Indonesia.
Oh, that's crazy. So you couldn't have, you couldn't have returned to China. They closed the border already.
I couldn't return to China. They did open up the border for, I think, 24 hours at one point. And so a few of my friends actually were like, "Oh, we got to get back," and try to hop on a plane and get there. But I was very wary of being in China during COVID, so I was not in a rush to do that. And then I could easily tell my work, "Oh, sorry, I missed that 24-hour block."
Good idea.
Yeah. I'm glad I did.
What happened in Sumatra? How did you spend 8 months there?
So my school moved to online learning, so I was able to work from there because I could access the internet. Yeah, I just kind of settled into life there. I'm a pretty adaptable person. But yeah, in the village at the time, it was just me and one other foreigner from the UK, and we became very good friends.
I bet, yeah.
And yeah, this place, I have so much heart for this place. The locals are so lovely and friendly, and then luckily because they work from tourism, they speak very good English. I got a Indonesian boyfriend.
You really settled in.
I really settled in. But it was also a very difficult time to be there as well because, again, everyone made money off of tourism. And unlike our lifestyle, people don't have savings accounts for just in case, whatnot. So very quickly, poverty became a real issue, which was a sad and difficult position for me because these are people that I loved and cared about, and they welcomed me into their community, and I'm with them all the time. I lived with them, but they can't afford food, and they're not going to eat tonight. So how can I go get some food when everyone around me is not eating?
Yeah.
So I was trying to help everyone financially, but then I can't
help a
this
whole
entire
village.
financially.
Yeah.
So it sometimes it was kind of sad, hard, awkward. I ended up doing a GoFundMe and actually made a lot of money. And yeah, like these people could live off of $1 or 2 a day for them and their families.
Yeah.
So the amount of money I could make from that GoFundMe
went a long way.
Really far.
And did you spend this whole time kind of wondering, oh, when will it be time to go back? Like, I don't know much about the border situation with China. I mean, here we were just locked down in Western Australia for basically 2 years. We couldn't even leave the state. It was extreme because we're very isolated. But what was it like there between Indonesia and China?
Yeah, so China was very, very strict with their border closings. And actually, when you're an international school teacher, you commonly have a 2-year contract. So I only had 6 months left on my contract. So I, for a long while, thought I was going to be going back, but it just kept never happening. But then at some point I was like, oh, I'm probably not going to be going back.
Right.
Which, to be honest, I was pretty fine with because I didn't really enjoy living in China. I was in a city of 20 million people in one city, and I realized I don't really like cities.
Which city were you in?
I was in Shenzhen, so it's actually right next to Hong Kong in the south.
I was just spent a night there last year when I went to Hong Kong. We went over the border just for a night into Shenzhen. So, yeah, that would be quite an overwhelmingly busy place to live.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you like cities, it's a very modern place, but I realized I'm not a city person. And that
So your contract essentially ran out while you were still in Indonesia, and that was that.
Yeah, but actually, yeah, for me it was a blessing. I was having a great time, and then also because Indonesia also closed their borders, no one could come in or out of Indonesia. So I got to do a lot of traveling in Indonesia and go to places where there was no one. Like Bali, for example, was empty.
That would be good.
Bali is so overrun and horrible usually.
Yep.
So I got to have lots of really interesting travel experiences within Indonesia, which was quite a blessing. Yeah.
One more practical question. So you had, I presume, you'd been living in Shenzhen in an apartment or something, but did you end up going back there did you have to go pack up? How did the logistics work?
Yeah, so they had their borders closed for a very, very, very long time. By the time I got my next job, I still couldn't enter the country. So I had to pay a company a lot of money to go into my apartment and literally pack everything for me, and my fridge is full and my dishes are left. So
you weren't expecting to be gone for 8 months, were you?
Yeah. And then ship all my stuff to the Caribbean, which was my next teaching post.
It is really weird to think back to the complete uncertainty of those years and to imagine how I would have felt in Shannon's position. At least, the whole pandemic, I was here in Western Australia. I didn't get stuck anywhere. I came home on a plane from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia in late January wearing masks because we had kind of heard that something was going on. But certainly we were not close to, getting locked out of the country or anything like that. But in any case, it sounds to me like Shannon made the most of it and it worked out well for her. Now, my next guest is a very long-time friend of the podcast and of mine, Eva Westerling. Eva had already made some big changes to her life before the pandemic started, but the interference of the pandemic also had a really big impact. Now, actually, this story kind of starts way back in episode 122 when I chatted with Eva about the trip to Morocco that began this huge change. But the story was really just starting then. So in this chat, she catches you all up.
A few people might remember this from way back. I quit my corporate job in early 2019 and came to Morocco basically to figure out what to do with my life and my money. And had the idea with my friend, back then just friend Hassan, who's now my partner, to set up another desert hiking trip. And so I asked around my group of friends and also in a few Facebook groups if anybody wanted to join me in October for a week-long desert hike. That actually happened with less people than we thought because one of the girls that actually found us through your podcast, she couldn't come because her holiday was cancelled super last minute. So in the end, it was just some of my friends, but we had like a great week and it was super amazing. And they all said, we really need to turn this into a business. Like we should build a website for it and offer this in like a professional capacity and not just collecting friends to go because it was such a fantastic holiday. They really loved it, like the detox, digital detox of it and, the immersion into nature and the Moroccan culture and everything. And so, after that, I actually sat down and tried to learn how to build a website and took a while. And then the pandemic hit and we were like, oh no, now nothing will happen because Morocco closed the borders for quite a while, opened them again for like a month or two. Then they shut again for 3 months. And it was just really like nobody was planning to go to Morocco because it meant you could get stuck here. And for quite a few people, it did. Like quite a few people actually weren't able to leave in between. But I kept thinking, well, it's still good to keep working on this now and actually build the website because I know how, because of my blog, I've had this experience how Google takes time to find you and know you and kind of push you. And so I figured, okay, even if nothing happens for the next 6 to 10 months, at least Google will learn. Google will know us. Google will see us. And once the borders open, we might actually rank fairly well. And we got really lucky. That's exactly what happened. For the main keywords, mostly in German, the competition is a bit harder in English, of course, but in the German market, there's like almost nothing for this type of travel. And so people actually found us by Googling. I think our very first client also indirectly found us through you.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Bob and Elliot, I don't know. They also have a podcast. They found me, or I found them in a Facebook group. But then they were like, "Oh, you're friends with Amanda? Great, yeah." So we basically know each other. We'll book with you. So they were. I think they might have been our very first clients after the pandemic. They, of course, left us a great review. So that was amazing and helped so much. But people found us through Google and contacted us and booked our tours. And the first year, of course, were just like smaller trips, kind of more low budget because people were not.
Did they also wonder, like maybe in those days, I always remember thinking, if I book something, I still don't know for sure if it will happen. And so I don't want to do anything really extravagant because I just don't really trust it.
Exactly. So a lot of things were last minute and we cannot plan or execute a 7-day camel trekking trip where we have to bring everything within a day. Like we do need 2 or 3 days lead time just to do the shopping and, prep everything and get the camels to the right place and all that. But yeah, so in the beginning, it was mostly just like hiking without camels around here. But yeah, that really took off. So I'm like, every time people ask, so how was the pandemic in Morocco? I say, well, for us, actually, in my memory, it wasn't really that bad. I mean, those 3 months of real lockdown where we were not allowed to leave the house, they were painful. Like for 10 days, I actually didn't leave the house. And then we snuck out at night and went for walks in the dunes with half the village. And that had to start later and later because the gendarmerie caught up on that and they started riding quads through the dunes trying to catch people because they could collect a fine if they caught you and stuff like that. So that was interesting, and then Ramadan also fell into the lockdown period and we just started sleeping until 2 and in the afternoon and then, sitting in the dunes from midnight to 3 and then have the dinner meal before going to bed, basically. And that was crazy, but also kind of fun. Like it was real. Like, I mean, I watched a lot of good movies in that time, but also it was real, like living in the moment, like watching the stars. I saw so many shooting stars every night. Like I learned so much about star constellation and the moon cycle and all those kind of like everything became so intuitive around, and it's so funny. For me, it's a time that I remember as good times. Like just no stress, like I was lucky because I didn't have to work. I still had enough savings to just be, like I wasn't worrying about stuff like that. And we were so isolated here that we also didn't worry so much about getting sick because, I mean, where would it come from? We weren't allowed to travel. Like it wouldn't just show up here, Yeah, that was really, really interesting. And then I also said, like, it actually, for us, it was good because business-wise, we didn't have to worry about not making money the first year. We knew we wouldn't make money the first year. We knew that. Like, we knew we would set everything up and nothing would happen because there was no tourism in Morocco. And I think psychologically, that makes it so much easier. You don't worry about it. You don't think too much about it. You just wait it out and see how it goes. And yeah, of course, the first year after we didn't really make much profit because, tourism picked up slowly. And also, of course, as a new business, things start slowly. The second year, we actually made enough money to live from. And last year, we made profit leftovers, kind of. So we're really hoping that this year will continue to be that successful because, it's been good. It's been fun. In a way, we are kind of thankful for the pandemic because it gave us a very relaxed start into starting a business.
So this is another example of making the most of a pandemic. Certainly wasn't in the plans, but it all worked out okay. This is, quite encouraging, isn't it? That sometimes awful things happen, but they are not equally awful for everyone. That gives us a bit of hope, I suppose. Now, my final guest today is Erin Gordon. Erin began the pandemic year in her kind of life as usual mode in a corporate job, but, well, as we know, things changed.
2020, the height of the pandemic. Here, at least in New England, I had been working in corporate jobs for my entire 20s. It was weird. It was almost like I fell asleep for this time in my life. I just was working in these jobs and I felt like, okay, if I just sacrifice this amount of time, I'm going to have freedom and flexibility and financial stability, all this good stuff. But then, of course, the pandemic happened. And, like everybody in the world, we all have different stories about it. For me, I was laid off from this job that I otherwise was just kind of in because I felt like it was something that I needed to do for whatever reason. Honestly, a reason I couldn't even say. I had this like really abrupt wake-up call at that time because you couldn't go anywhere. Really, you couldn't even go into the grocery store without some protocol, right? And I had this realization where I was like, wow, I haven't done anything. I haven't gone anywhere. I haven't done, I had traveled abroad, but really this was kind of like the beginning and the end of my experiences outside of New England. And so I don't know what to say. I went a little crazy and I got certified to teach English. And within 6 months, I moved to South Korea at the height of the pandemic. And
wow.
And, a lot of people said like, well, that's a really ridiculous idea, Erin. You're definitely going to get COVID on the plane. It didn't happen. I did have some really funky experiences there, though, because actually, I will say, in terms of the regulations, South Korea was a lot more strict and I'd say even more safe than the US. So even though I was working and I was out interacting with the world, there was a lot of protocol around, wearing a mask and keeping a distance from people. And I do think that generally people really respected that. I honestly thought that was a great time to go and I didn't get sick
You're probably safer
at all
there
that
than
year.
at home,
So.
really, yeah.
In a way, yeah. I was teaching English to kindergartners.
Oh,
Being involved in this new community and culture with students was a super interesting experience. I was probably just as curious about them and their lifestyle as they were me. I had this moment where not only was I in another country, but I was doing this job that I like truly enjoyed and requires you to be very present. It was a 180 from my life just 6 months earlier. It was this cataclysmic moment, right, to propel me into this totally different path in life. So I feel super grateful for that.
Amazing. I can imagine. But also, like, kudos to you. That's pretty brave to do that during the pandemic.
Thank you. Yeah, it was definitely interesting. I will tell you, I did have to quarantine when I arrived in Korea. Yep. And this is always kind of a funny story because, at the time I was really stuck in my apartment for 2 weeks and I couldn't leave. Right. And it was funny because a lot of my friends were super curious and also a little worried because they were like, what's going on? Like, how's your apartment? Like, what's it like being stuck in a, 5x5 space that you can't leave?
In a country you've just arrived in and like.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yes, they were, like I said, really strict about protocol. And so what I had to do is I had to download an app as soon as I arrived at the airport that was essentially like a GPS tracker.
Right.
And so like if I was in my apartment and if I left my apartment, my phone would start like beeping and would notify authorities. And so they were like super serious about quarantining. And they gave me a bunch of food to like hold me over for the week. That was like subsidized by the government, I believe. And then as well, they gave me the funniest part, I think, gave me these plastic bags to put my trash in. But the plastic bags had this like massive biohazard sign, like what you would see in a zombie movie, and that's like what I had to put my garbage in. Just so everyone knew, warning, this person might have COVID.
Watch out for your scary new neighbor.
Don't touch that. So
interesting.
Very funny.
Wow, that's a really interesting introduction to being in Korea.
Yeah, my introduction to Korea was a window view for 2 weeks. So, but it was a beautiful window view, and I was kind of like pawing at the glass, like, wow, I can't wait to go out and explore, and so it just made me yearn more for the outdoors. Yeah. So I really took advantage of being outside and hiking and doing all these day trips that when I had the opportunity to do it. I really tried to
make the most of it.
Fit those in where I could.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do think it's insanely brave to make a life change like this at that time, but it has worked out very well for Erin. I remember quite distinctly how I set off to change my career and teach in Japan, similar circumstances. But that was 2001 when the world felt very safe. In fact, it was pre-9/11. But fortune favours the brave, as they say, and it is working out for Erin. So, thank you so much for listening to episode 380 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Huge thanks to my guests for sharing these stories and for their, being brave both to share their stories and to create their stories in the first place. So you can find out more about Shannon at her website, shannon-o'brien.com. And she has just got a memoir coming out called Stray about some of her travel adventures. I'll leave a link in the show notes to that. Thanks also to Eva. You can find out more about her travels at her blog, notscaredofthejetlag.com, and also the tour business she talks about, which is berberadventuretours.com. If you want to go hiking in the beautiful dunes of Morocco or similar, then I'll leave that link in the show notes as well. And lastly, I chatted with Erin Gordon. More of Erin's work on her website, earthtoeditorial.com. And actually, just this week, Erin emailed me back to say that the TEDx talk she did on what it means to be a good traveller has finally come up live on the TEDx site, which is just perfect timing because we were chatting about it when we recorded. And I'll leave a link to that as well. It's really good. I have had a watch and I know that all of you thoughtful travellers will enjoy it. Don't forget also come along to the Facebook or LinkedIn groups for Thoughtful Travellers. Just search for Thoughtful Travellers on those platforms and keep up to date with Thoughtful Travel news at thoughtfultravel.substack.com. All of these links and more will be in the show notes, and you can find them at notaballerina.com/380. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.